Howdy, colleagues. This is Cale Moffat. Wanted to invite you to participate in a podcast group that I'll be leading this semester. For those who have not been involved in a podcast group, and I am one of them actually. This is my first time doing this, but it's the same idea as with a book group, but rather the text is our podcast episodes rather than a book. The podcast we'll be looking at or paying attention to is John Biewen's Seeing White, presented through Scene on Radio. Um, it's a 14-part series, um, so it is extended, and the podcast episodes can be accessed through the website, through Apple and Google Podcasts, each of them, Spotify, and other sources. I listen to the episodes through Spotify. So it's very easy to get a hold of. Okay, so the series considers very important questions such as where did the notion of whiteness come from? What does it mean? Um, what is whiteness for? What's its function? Um, what Biewen is doing, following a lot of critical whiteness studies scholars, is he's taking that race lens. In America, oftentimes, most of the time, when we talk about race, we're talking about um, racial minorities. We're talking about the other. What happens though if we take that lens and turn it back on ourselves, put ourselves under the microscope? Um, we start seeing what is left unnamed in most of our experiences, what is left unexplored as we look at our racialized position as white persons. Um, like I said, the podcast is has 14 episodes. I've broken them up into 4 different chunks, so we'll be meeting and talking about those chunks. Okay, so the podcast group will be an invitation to start looking at race from a different perspective, especially I think this is especially important now as we, as a community, are thinking about these questions. We have had to acknowledge or kind of confront some um, of the complexities of our kind of communal racialization. And as we try to ask questions and think about, okay, how do we take the university from a very white space? How do we branch it out um, to be more inclusive, more equitable for students and faculty and staff of color? Um, right, so we need to, right, so this is, the podcast group will be looking at what is the initial state, how do we understand the initial state. The episodes kind of start out, there's always kind of a historical framing, but then there's always this move towards how does this affect um, contemporary society and culture. And also there are aspects of communication and representation in there. How does this affect communication and representation? I'd like to run it through Microsoft Teams, and we'll be able to have, through that we'll be able to have kind of virtual meetings, right? Video sessions. The video sessions can be Thursdays at 2:00, and I'll provide the schedule below. I recognize that can be difficult for some, possibly many, so we will also be looking at doing things asynchronously through the discussion features. Each of the chunks that I've set up will be kind of working with the study guide that Biewen wrote, and so using those questions as springboards into discussions. But I'm also hoping that we respond to some of the questions in writing on the discussion board, and that we create a dialogue, that we respond to others' responses. And this way, I'm hoping to increase engagement and social learning. One of the things that I found in my personal journey in anti-racism is that those interactions are critical, especially interactions between white persons or persons who identify as white trying to do the same things. And part of that is, we can say things or ask questions that could bother persons of color. We can talk and ask, work those through with each other without alienating colleagues. And I think that's really, really important. And we need to go through that process in our growth. So, we can do that. We can also encourage each other, kind of help each other take stock. Where am I? And we do need encouragement in this work, because we're gonna kind of mess things up. We're gonna mess things up. We're gonna backslide and say stupid things. But this is a way of building that community so we can strengthen each other. So I'd like that kind of give and take. I would also really love to consider having each participant produce either a vlog, a video blog, or an audio piece, sort of like a podcast episode, on some aspect of our journey. And we can talk a little bit more about this, right? Questions we could ask would be, what's something that I've learned through this podcast? What's something that I've learned in recent events? What stories do I have about understanding our racialized position? I'm actually going to be working on an example to share with y'all, to try to help, provide an example. I don't want it to be terribly involved. This isn't a class, so we can't compel anybody to do anything, but an invitation. And the more we engage, and the more we invest ourselves in this journey, the more we can get out of it, the stronger supporters for racial equity we become. Anyway, I'm going to put some more details down below in this Google form for signing up. I hope that you'll join me. Take care.